Ayanda Hyathi, great to have you with us. Now, stiff fines are meant to be a deterrent to motorists who find themselves on the wrong side of the law. The Administrative Adjudication of Road Traffic Offences Act and the demerit system is expected to change the errant behaviours of motorists. Now, just last week, we saw a driver clock a speed of over 300 kilometres per hour. Now, he's been arrested and the matter is before the courts. However, the question remains whether his punishment will deter him from repeating a similar offence. And to answer these questions and help us understand this AARTO Act, I'm joined now by the Automobile Association spokesperson, Layton Beard. Mr. Beard, thanks very much for making time for us. Welcome to NewzroomAfrika.
Thank you so much, Ayanda. Good to be with you.
So perhaps we should start with the very latest news item linked to this, which is, of course, the speedster and how the law has responded essentially to what he's done.
Right.
He's out on, I think, 1,000 Rand bail?
Yes, that's right. And it's extremely disappointing.
Right.
You know, when you're driving at 308 kilometers an hour, if you look at the video in which this person is driving, you can clearly see a timestamp, which is 10:30 at night, 22:31. He's driving on the N1 highway between Johannesburg and Pretoria. There are clearly other cars on the road as well. For our money, we would have liked to have seen this bail put a lot higher than what it was, and for this person to remain in jail until his case, comes up to court. So very disappointing that he's been released on 1,000 Rand bail, and I think it sends a message that it's okay to do that. If you've got 1,000 Rand spare, you can speed because you're going to get out on bail, and obviously we now wait and see what happens with the court process, but we hope that the book gets thrown at this person, that his license gets taken away, and that he's never allowed to drive on the roads again, because clearly he doesn't deserve to share the road with other road users. Right.
Now, I might be wrong on this, but I can't remember a similar case to this one, where essentially somebody's driving over 300 kilometers. Right. You speak about the book being thrown at him. I wonder, though, whether there's anything the book can do, considering the fact that we haven't really been here before.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, Ayanda. It's a very good point you're making, and I think the Minister of Transport, when he released the festive season stats last week, made the point that there is a disconnect between what traffic law enforcement is doing and what the courts and the punishment side of things are doing, what the Justice Department is doing. So I think that he's obviously discussing this with his colleagues in Cabinet, specifically those in the Justice cluster. But yes, I think that there is an issue when it comes to, we take people off the road, but does the justice system deal with them effectively enough to act as a deterrent to other drivers and to keep those other errant drivers off the road? And I think at the moment there is definitely a disconnect in that regard.
And this is where the AARTO Act is meant to get in. And as I say that, you're rolling your eyes. And it's not without its criticism. And you've been at the forefront of that in some instance.
Yes.
It's meant to launch in June. Is that ready? Are we ready for that, though? Is it an act that can essentially be introduced and work proficiently?
I think there are question marks around whether, from a practical IT implementation level, we are ready for that or not. I think the start date was announced as July. So the minister and his department believe that they are ready. I think it remains to be seen whether they are. I mean, obviously, the closer we'll get some updates on that. I think from a practical point of view, there are question marks as to whether the system will be ready, to go live in July. From an application point of view, the AA has raised a number of concerns, and you rightly said that we've been at the forefront in some instances of criticism of that. The system is designed to improve road safety in South Africa. That's what the whole raison d'etre of the AARTO system is. Our view is that it's not necessarily going to perform that role. When you look at some of the demerit points that are there for offenders, for instance, you get 1 demerit point for not wearing your seatbelt. Now, in our view, that should be a lot higher. And there are many, many examples of that. There are issues around, for instance, when you want to find out how many demerit points you have to make an application for that, and then you have to actually pay for that as well. So we have labeled this as something that is intended to generate revenue, and we feel that the system, as it is going to be implemented, has a lot of flaws and really is not going to fulfill the role of making roads safer, but really is there to generate money.
I wonder, though, then what happens in the interim, right? There's obviously, I think, a unanimous sentiment that the law as it exists now is not enough to deter people from breaking it.
Sure.
And I imagine, there's a consensus to move in one direction.
Right.
As we undergo that process, what can be done really to, I guess, clamp down on what's actually happening on the ground, which is, according to some people, utter lawlessness?
Yeah, another great question. I think, a couple of months back, there was a report that was released by a committee that was actually started by the Department of Transport, and it looked into traffic law enforcement in South Africa. And they made a number of recommendations. We need to double the amount of traffic law enforcers in South Africa. We need to throw more resources and funding at traffic law enforcement. We need to have education programs in schools. We need to have better outreach programs. There was a raft of recommendations that this committee made. I think that for us would be a better starting point. We need to be looking at these types of recommendations. Yes, there may be gaps in the law. Yes, there may be a gap in the justice system. Yes, there is a gap in terms of punishment. But these types of issues were dealt with by this committee. Now, for in our opinion, we need to be looking at the recommendations of this committee that spent a lot of time, speaking to a range of different players, including the AA and other civil organizations and government departments, and bringing that together. Because just to have a system like AARTO implemented in July, where you've got the system and there are, like I said, in our minds, flaws in it, is not going to solve the problem. You need to look at this from the point of view of what this committee did, and they said, look, we've got this issue with traffic law enforcement, this is how we can deal with it, and this is how we can take it forward. Now, that for us is a better solution. Implementing AARTO, we don't believe is going to be the solution.
The reality, though, is that at least as things stand so far, AARTO might be implemented come June, July, or whatever it may be. What's the responsible civil action that can be taken in response to the many flaws that people have pointed out? I mean, do we boycott it like we did the e-tolls, or how should we respond?
No, look, I mean, obviously we would never advocate for anybody to go on a course of civil disobedience. You've got to apply the law, and if AARTO becomes law, then you've got to accept that, and you've got to work within the law. I think our message to motorists and to drivers generally is, you've got to obey the rules of the road. You've got to drive within the law that is there. There may be issues with AARTO, and I think we accept that, but that is not the law in terms of how you should be driving. I think when you look at the statistics, Ayanda, 85% of all crashes and fatalities in our country are caused through human error. Now, that tells you a story, and that story is that no matter what law you have, people simply don't apply the rules of the road when they're behind the wheel of a car. Now, our message is, AARTO, good, bad, doesn't actually matter. You've got to, when you get into your car, put your cell phone away, put your seatbelt on, drive to the speed limit, drive to the conditions of the road, make sure your car is roadworthy, buckle up other passengers in your vehicle. You've got to apply those rules, okay? And you can't say, well, I disagree with this, with AARTO, therefore I'm not going to, drive within. No, you can't do that. You've got to drive within the rules of the road. So that is the first step. I think that we acknowledge that, and government even acknowledges, that more needs to be done to improve road safety and application of the law. Government knows that. We know that. Everybody knows that. The issues come in. We have too many drivers on our road who are selfish on our roads, who don't drive to the rules of the road, and who think that the road belongs to them and them alone. We've got to change that attitude. We share the road with others. We've got to obey the rules of the road. That's the most important starting point is everybody has to drive within the rules of the road.
Very quickly, though, I do wonder, how different are the problems facing South African motorists different to the situation elsewhere, right, overseas, for argument's sake? I mean, are South Africans specifically more selfish on the road and specifically more ignorant of what the rules are?
I think that we are, and I think that there's an issue in terms of law enforcement, because I think people drive outside of the rules of the road because they know that there's no consequences, so that obviously is a big issue. Anybody who's driven overseas will tell you that people are courteous when they drive in other countries. People give way, they drive to the conditions of the road, they wear their seatbelts, so that type of behavior is something that we would obviously like to see replicated in South Africa. We have our own unique set of issues in South Africa, but again, Ayanda, bottom line, if anybody's watching this, please obey the rules of the road and drive to the laws.
And it's on that strong message where we'll leave it. Thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Layton Beard is, of course, the spokesperson of the Automobile Association. I do appreciate your company.